Melisandre arrived in the Seven Kingdoms beneath a sky soaked in the flames of dusk. The last rays of the dying sun made the waves shimmer copper and gold as her ship sliced a path toward King's Landing. She stood at the prow, a solitary figure in red, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of sunset as her lips quietly moved in prayer to the Lord of Light. The city's distant ramparts rose from the edge of the sea, a testament to the power of House Targaryen of old, and now to King Robert Baratheon's reign, though she knew it teetered upon the blade of a secret. Shadows lingered inside the Red Keep's walls, shadows of lions, and she had come to bring them forth into the light. She stepped ashore with an otherworldly grace, ignoring the curious stares of merchants loading their wagons, the suspicious glances of guards who had never seen a priestess from as high. Her presence invited whispers, speculation, and subtle fear, for she bore a staff crowned with a ruby at its tip, and her red robes were a color too vivid for King's Landing's grimy docks. Yet no one moved to bar her way, and she did not deign to speak to them. She was Melisandre of the Shadow, Red Priestess of R'hllor, and she traveled with purpose, not pomp. It was dusk by the time she reached the gates of the Red Keep, the great fortress perched high above the city, a fortress whose corridors she believed festered with secrets that would upend the realm. She had not crossed the narrow sea to bow or beg favor. The flames had told her a story of war and darkness, of a false king and the rightful one. Yet as she walked past the red-cloaked guards and along the castle's stone paths, she reflected how the vision of the flames had shifted. She had once believed Stannis Baratheon was the chosen one, that he carried the blood of kings and the spark of Azor Ahai reborn. But the fires had twisted, unveiling new shapes. She had seen a stag crowned in gold, a cask of wine upturned, a lion's golden mane stained with blood, and the silhouette of a cunning creature lurking behind a boy king. She prayed each night for clarity. The Lord of Light had guided her across the sea, showing her that Robert Baratheon, the so-called usurper to some, might be the key to preventing a greater darkness. She had expected to stand at Stannis' side on grim Dragonstone, forging him into the warrior of light. But the future coiled like a pit viper, ever shifting. Instead, the Red Priestess found herself in King's Landing, on a mission to reach a man rumored to be as stubborn and headstrong as the bull sigil of House Baratheon implied. King Robert was not a man of great faith or subtlety. He was a warrior who had seized the Iron Throne by force, a man who had once been fueled by love and vengeance. But the crown had weighed heavy on him, draining his vigor year after year, chasing solace in drink and feasts. Melisandre had seen the dissolution of his spirit in the flames. She had seen the shadow of a lion gnawing at his heart, poisoning the realm. She had come to offer him truth, so she told herself, but also, in her more private moments, she knew there was a deeper purpose behind it all. The light demanded it. The realm would bleed unless the Lannisters' deception was dragged into the open. Escorted by a pair of uncertain gold cloaks, she passed silent hallways adorned with crimson tapestries bearing the crowned stag of Baratheon. Torchlight flickered across black and gold banners, the dancing shadows seeming to bow before her as she walked. A few courtiers lurked by the corners, intrigued by the sight of this foreign woman in red, but no one dared approach. The hush in the corridors was the hush of a place that sensed changing winds. At last, the guards led her to the King's Solar, a grand chamber off the Great Hall. The door was thrown open, and she was announced in a voice thick with uncertainty. "My lord," a woman from across the narrow sea, a Red Priestess from Ashai, requesting an audience. Within, Robert Baratheon was half-slumped in a chair, thick arms draped over the sides, his face flushed from recent drinking. He looked up, and his gaze settled on her with a warrior's suspicion. He still possessed the towering presence that had once hammered Rhaegar Targaryen into the trident, though his belly pressed against a leather doublet, and faint lines wreathed the corners of his eyes. Yet the real brightness lay in those blue eyes, a flicker of the old Robert, watchful, cunning, potentially dangerous. Melisandre inclined her head, not quite a bow. "Your Grace," she said, voice low and melodic. The guards had retreated, leaving them alone. She sensed the hush that seemed to deepen in the Solar, as if the castle itself held its breath. aware that a piece in the great game had just moved into a new position. Robert frowned at her. What business could a red priestess have with me? I've no love for foreign gods, woman. I pray to the seven, or sometimes not at all. He snorted in self-derision. But I'll hear you out. My curiosity's at least that strong. She stepped forward, the ruby at her throat catching the torchlight. A flicker of red played on the walls, dancing in time with her heartbeat. My lord, I bring warnings. I come to show you a truth hidden by illusions. Her accent gave an exotic lilt to her words, and Robert's frown deepened, though he did not interrupt. I am Melisandre of Ashai, she said, a servant of the Lord of Light. He has granted me visions in the flames. Most prove fleeting, illusions that drift across the mind's eye, but some burn with a clarity too strong to deny. There is a darkness upon this throne, a lie that rots the realm from within. Robert raised a thick, dark eyebrow. Is that so? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, sudden curiosity blossoming in his eyes. What sort of darkness do you speak of? There were rumors that Robert Baratheon did not trust many outside of his old friend Eddard Stark, though even that relationship had grown strained since the rebellion. But Melisandre saw a flicker in his eyes, as if he recognized that her words were not the standard flattery or empty threats he so often endured from courtiers. A shadow in gold, she replied. A lion that claims what is not rightfully his. A line of succession that is false. For a time, Robert was silent. He had grown up in a world of warriors' honor and ambition, but he was not a fool. Rumors about his queen's fidelity had occasionally reached him. He had brushed them aside or smothered them in wine and hunts. Yet Melisandre's words touched a nerve. She watched him wrestle with memory and suspicion, the flush in his cheeks deepening. You mean to speak of the Lannisters, he said, his tone dangerous. Careful, woman. That's my wife's house. Melisandre did not flinch. So it is. And it is they who hold power close to your side. They who whisper in your ear. They who have twisted your bed, your grace. Robert's face went still as stone, yet the thundercloud of rage was already forming behind his eyes. He had struggled with doubt for years. He had turned away from it, for acknowledging his own cuckoldry would have undone him. He had always suspected, but the cost of confronting that suspicion had been too great. I know you want something, he growled. All who come to the court want something from me. I want to protect the realm, she said, voice lilting with sincerity. I have seen the long night that threatens these lands, and the hero that must stand against it. The champion of light must be properly supported, not overshadowed by false heirs and false counsel. He stared at her for a long moment. And who is this champion you speak of? The fires once pointed me to your brother Stannis, she answered, though a faint note of uncertainty crept into her voice. He is a man of grim determination. The flames suggested he bore the essence of Azor Ahai, or might yet become so. But my visions shifted, blurred, revealing something else, and I realized the Lord of Light intends for me to come to you first. I saw you crowned in truth, not overshadowed by the Lannisters' deception. The illusions revolve around your children, or those you believe are your children. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. They are not of your blood, my king. He felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Fury rose in his chest, unstoppable, warring with a deep sickness and the remains of a shattered love for the golden-haired woman he had married. You speak bold words, he managed, voice dark as a storm. Prove them, or you'll see how quickly my mood sours. And so, she offered him proofs of the flesh, quietly and methodically. The color of the children's hair, the bloodlines of House Baratheon that always yielded black-haired heirs, the rumors of Cersei's bedchamber, and the presence of her twin brother, Ser Jaime, always near. Robert listened, a thick vein standing out on his neck, his hands balled into fists. He recalled half-forgotten jests from Lannister men, the difference in color between him and his supposed son, the uncertain hush that fell whenever he drew near his queen. One memory after another surfaced, reshaped by the priestess's words into an undeniable pattern. When she finished, the king rose abruptly, pacing to the window. He stared out over the courtyard, the torches shimmering in the gloom below. She could feel his rage emanating like heat from a forge. "Why come to me with this?" he demanded eventually, still not facing her. "Stannis, I always thought he had the appetite for knowledge that would unseat me if it served him. If you wanted to help him, you'd have gone to him first." "I tried," she said softly. "But the flames told me that path would lead to devastation. The realm would tear itself apart if Stannis moved against you in the dark. The War of the Five Kings, an endless conflagration. I saw that possibility. But there is another path. One where you see the treachery for yourself, and thus act with your power as king, forging a new future. One that might preserve the living for the true war to come." Robert turned to her, eyes bloodshot yet bright with a warrior's fire. "I loved a woman once," he said in a slow, broken hush. "All of this, my throne, my crown, it began with her death. The Targaryens took her from me, and I swore I'd see them all buried. Cersei was... I never loved her, I only bedded her out of duty. And she repaid me by giving me bastards that aren't even mine." Melisandre felt a flicker of pity, though pity was a rare emotion for her. Robert Baratheon was a tired king, cradling wounds to his pride and heart that had never healed. "You can still claim your throne, truly," she said, "but it requires boldness. Once the lion in your midst is exposed, you must root it out, or it will devour your reign. They have allies, gold, and cunning. This will not be easy." "Nothing worth doing is," Robert spat. He fixed her with a hard glare. "And if I believe your claims, do you stand by my side if war breaks out? You and your red god." "I stand by the light, your grace. That means standing by the rightful king, the rightful line. If the darkness tries to swallow us, I will do what must be done." She inclined her head again. The ruby at her throat flashed once, like a heartbeat. "It is not only war you face within. Winter is coming, and with it, a threat to all living souls. The Lord of Light stands against the ancient cold that stirs beyond the wall. Darkness will test all. That is why I came, to ensure the living are not weakened by your enemies." Robert's broad shoulders heaved with effort, as if it took all his strength not to overturn every table in that chamber. "So be it," he said, voice a growl. "I must speak with Eddard. He alone will tell me if these claims hold water. But if what you say is true..." His fist slammed into his palm. "By the gods, I'll put the Lannisters to the sword." Thus began the shifting of the world. A single flame of truth lit in Robert Baratheon's mind. He summoned Eddard Stark and demanded his counsel, discarding the old excuses he had made to himself. Ned, reticent and honorable, admitted his own suspicions. More than once, the notion that Cersei's children were Jaime's whelp had hovered at the edge of his thoughts. But lacking proof, and out of loyalty to Robert, he had kept silent. Now, with Melisandre's words stirring the coals of suspicion into fire, Ned reluctantly shared what he knew of Jon Arryn's final days, the Book of Lineage, and the cryptic phrase the old hand had muttered on his deathbed. "The seed is strong." Robert roared when Ned admitted he had suspected but hadn't told him. Furious at the duplicity that roiled all around him, Robert raged at the Red Keep. Servants fled, and courtiers trembled. Whispers spread throughout the castle like wildfire. Something had set the king ablaze with anger, but few knew its cause. Melisandre kept her silence, letting the events take their course. A single truth, once revealed, could not be put back. Cersei sensed a turning wind. She was no fool. She saw how Robert glowered at her at supper, how he no longer sought her bed. The gold cloaks changed their patrols. New men posted near her chambers, men loyal to the king alone. Jaime Lannister grew restless, one hand always near the hilt of his sword, and he confronted Robert once in a hallway, a confrontation that ended with Robert punching Jaime across the jaw, hurling him into a column. The Kingsguard who witnessed it dared not speak. Jaime, tasting blood in his mouth, stared at Robert with eyes that promised violence. Yet Robert was still the king, and the realm was not yet in open war. When Littlefinger slyly approached Melisandre to discover the cause of all this tension, she offered no direct answers, only a faint smile and riddles about the rising sun in the darkness. He withdrew, more intrigued than ever. Varys, the spider, tried as well, but the Red Priestess simply gazed at him as if she could see the shape of his soul, and he retreated, unsettled. At times, the King's Court had thought themselves masters of secrets. Now they found a new player had come from across the sea, armed with mysteries of her own. Within a fortnight of Melisandre's arrival, Robert privately confronted Cersei with Ned and the Red Priestess present. The Queen tried to lie, tried to claim ignorance, but Robert had proofs enough. The hair color, the lineage, the frequent presence of Jaime in her bedchamber, and a letter left behind by Jon Arryn. He had cornered her, all but roaring in her face. She tried seduction, tears, then threats, but Robert was beyond caring. When she spat that if he touched her, Tywin Lannister would rise in arms, Robert simply backhanded her, sending her sprawling. Ned intervened before the king could strike again, reminding Robert of the dignity of the crown. Melisandre watched, impassive as stone. The next morning, Robert declared that Cersei and her children were no longer welcome in King's Landing. He set them under guard, separated, while he decided their fates. No word was sent to Casterly Rock yet. Robert had not decided how best to handle Tywin's inevitable fury, but illusions that had stood for years collapsed. The hush in the Red Keep was thick and terrible, like the moment before a thunderstorm's first crash. As the days passed, Ned advised caution. Exposing the children as bastards was a grave matter, with many ramifications for the realm. Robert eventually agreed that a quieter approach might be best while he gathered allies. He still had two brothers, Stannis on Dragonstone and Renly in the capital. He had old ties to the north through Ned. He had alliances that had once helped him topple the Targaryens. The question was how best to preserve peace while dealing justice to the Lannisters. But men like Tywin would not sit idle. If the rumors reached him, a sword would be unsheathed. Melisandre offered another path. "Allow me to glean truth in the flames," she told Robert one evening, as they stood near the large hearth in the council chamber. "The Lord of Light may grant us a vision of the path ahead, so we can see what moves the enemy might make." The king was dubious, not a man for mystic illusions, but he found himself too uncertain of the realm's future to refuse. If Melisandre truly had glimpses beyond mortal eyes, perhaps it would give him an advantage. So he stood, arms folded, as she lit a brazier of coals, sprinkling them with strange powders that made the flames dance green, then purple, then a searing white. The air smelled of smoke and spice. Her ruby glowed, pulsing in time with her whispered incantations. Robert watched, tension in every muscle, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple in the heat. Melisandre's eyes became half-lidded as the flames leapt higher. She saw shapes swirling in the fire. A great golden lion prowling across a field of ashes, a dead stag lying upon a bed of fresh grass, a boy with blazing hair brandishing a sword that dripped blood. She saw a woman, crowned in gold, sobbing in the darkness. She saw a gold hand gripping an iron throne, and a field of red that might be blood or might be poppies. Then it all dissolved into black shadows. She gasped, blinking, returning to the world of stone and sweat. Robert pressed her. "What did you see?" She steadied herself, clutching the staff. "Blood, your grace. Blood on a scale that could drown the realm. The Lannisters will not suffer this lightly. They will raise the banners of war if you move against them without cunning." I saw Tywin Lannister forging alliances, whispering promises of wealth. If they are not challenged swiftly, their power grows. Robert let out a low snarl, reminded of the might of House Lannister's gold. "You speak of cunning. I'm no schemer. I won my throne on the battlefield with warhammers and steel. Are you telling me to strike first?" She shook her head slowly. "I am telling you to act in the light of truth, swiftly but wisely, to gather those who are loyal to the rightful king. To oust your false queen openly might provoke the lion's rage, but if you do nothing, they will strike first. Still, the vision is murky. There are many threads. Eddard Stark counseled that Robert should send trusted men to speak with Tywin, to try a diplomatic approach that might save bloodshed. Renly, more ambitious, suggested removing Cersei and her children quietly, perhaps confining them to a secure holdfast until they could be used as leverage. Melisandre offered that a public trial, with the evidence laid bare, might rally the great houses behind the king. After all, no one would want to defend a proven cuckolding and false succession. Yet the king remained torn. Each choice might lead to war. In the midst of these debates, word reached King's Landing. Tywin Lannister was gathering his forces near the borders of the Westerlands. Scouts reported wagons of provisions moving to Casterly Rock, and gold cloaks loyal to the queen had slipped away to join them. Betrayal brewed among the king's own ranks. Tension choked the capital's streets like thick fog. People spoke of the king's simmering anger and the queen's imprisonment. The rumor that Joffrey was not truly Robert's son trickled outward in hushed tones, fueling gossip in taverns and among the small folk. Within the Red Keep, Jaime Lannister languished under suspicion. He was not imprisoned but forced to remain in his chambers under guard. His eyes flashed with dangerous brilliance whenever the king passed. Robert refused him the chance to defend himself in open combat, too dangerous to risk a public spectacle. Instead, Robert threatened to have Jaime's head should Tywin march on the capital. For all his arrogance, Jaime's concern for his twin sister and for his own life made him wah. Ned Stark, unsettled by the potential for war, turned to Melisandre in private, seeking her counsel. She stood in a balcony corridor overlooking the Blackwater Bay, the red of her robes melting into the dusk. Ned was a man of honor, unaccustomed to dealing with mystics and foreign priests. But desperation gnawed at him. The king is set on a path that leads to a clash with House Lannister. The realm still recovers from rebellion, and winter draws near. War now could be devastating. Is there a chance for peace? Melisandre's expression was unreadable. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Sometimes a small war spares the realm from a larger one. The fires showed me a great war to come, one far more dangerous than any in living memory. If your king does not secure his power now, the realm will be too broken to withstand the true threat when it arrives. Ned was silent, his mind drifting to his family in the north, to Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon. This threat you keep hinting at, beyond the wall? Her eyes seemed to blaze with a hidden light. Yes, death that walks, the long night reborn. I have glimpsed shapes of ice, whites that march behind beings of pale frost. A war of the living against the dead. Yet the living wage petty wars among themselves, blind to the real danger. This is why I came. I believed Stannis might unify the realm when the time came, but the flames revealed another path. Robert must rid himself of the lion's poison if he is to stand strong. Ned mulled this over, uncertain if he believed in such supernatural threats. But he had seen enough war to know how precarious the realm was. He thanked her curtly, departing to continue advising Robert. A fortnight passed, and tension continued to build. Soldiers loyal to the crown scoured the city for Lannister allies. A few minor lords and knights tried to leave quietly, heading west to Casterly Rock, but they were detained. Tywin's troops were reported on the march at last, though slowly, as if gathering strength. Robert thundered at the council table, slamming his fist. If that old lion thinks to drag me into another war, I'll smash him the same way I smashed Rhaegar. But his bravado could not hide the dread that the Lannisters might have more cunning than an honorable fight in the open field. Word arrived that Tyrion Lannister, the imp, had been dispatched to treat with the crown. The small man's intelligence was renowned, and Robert was no fool. He suspected Tywin wanted to buy time or discover King's Landing's weaknesses. Yet Robert saw an opportunity. Perhaps Tyrion, with his rumored realism, might see reason. When Tyrion arrived under a small escort, the Red Keep buzzed with speculation. They brought him before the king, who sat upon the Iron Throne in all his battered fury, Melisandre standing to one side in her scarlet robes, Eddard Stark at the other, and an array of courtiers behind. Tyrion bowed theatrically, remarking on how warm the capital was compared to the Westerlands, ignoring Robert's glare. Robert's voice boomed through the hall. "So, your father sends you. Does he hope to parley?" Tyrion wore a polite smile, though tension sharpened his features. "My lord father wishes to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, if possible. He requests the safe return of my sister and her children." At that, Robert barked a laugh, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Those children are no kin of mine, born of incest, bastards in line to steal my crown. He thinks I'll just hand them back to him so they can continue their treason under a new scheme." Tyrion's eyes flickered to Melisandre, then back to Robert. "I see you've had a new counselor in your midst, your grace. I'd caution you not to trust so readily in fancy visions." Melisandre felt the hostility behind his gaze. This man was cunning, witty, armed with words like a sellsword with daggers. She said nothing, letting the king speak. Robert's face clouded. "I trust my old friend Ned Stark's words too. Jon Arryn died digging up the truth of your sister's children. I'd wager he was killed for it, perhaps by Lannister assassins, or by her own hand." The hall murmured with shock, but Tyrion only shrugged. "A vile accusation. My sister had no motive to kill Jon Arryn, if you think about it. He was quite discreet, from what I gather. Why kill him if no suspicion had come to light? Couldn't we consider the possibility that someone else arranged his demise?" Melisandre watched the interplay. Tyrion was planting seeds of doubt, a gambit to divert suspicion. She spoke at last, her voice softly resonant. "The lion claws in the shadows. The truth stands, dwarf, and the realm shall see it. These children are no rightful heirs." "Be that as it may," Tyrion said. "They are children. My father would see them spared from cruelty. He would also like his daughter returned, although I fear she might not be so welcome in King's Landing at the moment." Robert rose from the throne with a sudden lurch. "Your sister spat on my name, betrayed me, conceived bastards under my roof. The realm is outraged, or will be once I make it all public. She isn't fit to be queen. And if Tywin expects me to send them back, he has another thing coming." Tyrion bowed his head briefly, as if in acknowledgement. "Then I see we are at an impasse. My father has many banners he can call upon, and while you are the king, war is rarely so simple. The realm doesn't need another conflict, especially not one that might encourage other great lords to think they can carve out a peace for themselves." A hush fell. Melisandre stepped forward, her eyes locked on the imp. "There is a greater war to come, Master Lannister. One that will demand every sword in the realm to face it. Infighting only weakens us." Tyrion tilted his head curiously. "What war is this? Some fable from across the sea?" She stared at him with an intensity that made his usual flippancy falter. "Mock if you will, but you know the realm's vulnerability better than most. If the living do not unite, we will succumb to a greater terror than Tywin Lannister can muster." The dwarf considered her carefully. "Even if that's true, my father is not a man who yields out of fear of the unknown. He deals in the tangible: gold, power, advantage. If you propose peace, what do you offer in return?" Robert's lips curled. "You are in no position to bargain. I'm the king, and your sister is in my dungeons." "Dungeons?" Tyrion repeated in a soft, dangerous tone. "I was under the impression she was simply confined. You must be careful with your words, your grace, for your father by marriage is not a forgiving man." It took all of Robert's self-control not to order Tyrion arrested on the spot. But Ned touched his arm, and the king swallowed his anger for a moment. "Go back to Tywin," he finally said. "Tell him the truth. Cersei's done. The children are bastards. If he values them, he can talk peace with me. But if he raises arms, I'll show him no mercy." Tyrion inclined his head, an inscrutable expression crossing his features. "I will carry your words, but I suspect there will be blood before any resolution." He cast one last glance at Melisandre, a flicker of something like curiosity in his mismatched eyes, before taking his leave. Tyrion's departure felt like a spark falling on dry tinder. The entire city braced for what might come next. Robert mobilized the city watch, placing them under the command of men he trusted instead of Littlefinger's favorites. He reached out to the Tyrells, the Martells, and others, seeking alliances that might check House Lannister's power. Yet the memory of the rebellion was still fresh, and many houses hesitated, uncertain how the Crown's scandal might affect the realm. In the shadows of the Red Keep, Peter Baelish whispered, Varys listened, and the Game of Thrones churned. Melisandre watched from her vantage, always calm, always focused on the flicker of the flames. She saw the path twisting. War threatened to erupt, but perhaps with skill, Robert could force Tywin's hand and avoid a drawn-out conflict. One evening, Robert called for Cersei to be brought before him once more. She stood, proud and furious, though shackles adorned her wrists. Her cheeks bore the faint bruise from Robert's earlier blow. The king glowered at her, regret mingling with anger. You've damned our marriage and my name. Still, you were my queen. Where do we go from here? Cersei lifted her chin defiantly. I want my children back, she said. They are mine, and I will not see them harmed. Robert's laugh was harsh. Your children, not mine. I'd wring the boy's neck if it wouldn't cause half the realm to turn on me. But I'm not wholly cruel. Their innocence in your treachery. Yet your father marches on me, and those children are a source of power. I'm no fool. I'll not hand them over while Tywin threatens the kingdom. Cersei's green eyes flashed. You speak of cruelty. Do you think Tywin won't repay blood with blood? You will cause the realm to shatter, all for your pride. Robert slammed his fist on the table. Pride? My pride? You spat on your vow before the gods and the realm. You let your brother sire your heirs in my bed, and you dare speak of pride. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a low hiss. No, the realm's in danger because your father thinks he can seat a bastard on my throne. Well, he can't. And he won't. She stared at him, hatred raw and fierce. You never loved me. Why should I not find comfort where I could? He closed his eyes, briefly seeing the ghost of the woman he had loved, who died so long ago. I may not have loved you as I loved Lyanna, but you were my wife. You should have borne me true children. If you had, none of this would be happening. Cersei might have softened for a moment, but the moment was fleeting. Her face hardened. I was never going to be your broodmare. You wanted to pretend I was someone else, even in our marriage bed. Now here we are. He stood abruptly, gesturing for the guards to take her away. You'll remain my prisoner until I decide otherwise. Don't speak to me of your father again. She left, refusing to look back, head held high despite the shackles. Robert stared at the door long after it closed. Melisandre, who had silently observed the exchange, stepped forward. You do her a mercy, sparing her life, she said quietly. Robert nodded grimly. I'm not sure for how long. If Tywin launches a full assault, I might hang her from the walls just to prove a point. But I'm still not sure how to handle this without starting a war that could burn the kingdom. Melisandre placed her fingertips on the table. Prepare for the worst, but keep open a path for diplomacy. Let the realm see the proof of her treachery, so they know any war is Tywin's doing, not yours. Invite the great lords to witness a public hearing, present the evidence of bastard children, make it undeniable. Then, if Tywin attacks, he appears the aggressor. He exhaled. It might work. We'll see if the lords rally to me, or if their fear of Lannister gold is stronger. Melisandre bowed her head. Sometimes it only takes a spark to light a fire that will guide men through the darkness. In the nights that followed, she prepared for a public hearing to reveal Cersei's crimes. Letters were sent across the realm, summoning lords to King's Landing under the king's protection. Some complied, fearing to provoke Robert's wrath. Others hesitated. Tywin, still in the field, sent no reply, though his banners continued to mass. Jaime Lannister seethed in captivity. The city braced for the spectacle, and rumors flew faster than ravens. The queen was an adulteress. The children would be exposed. Incest. Royal bastards. When the appointed day came, the throne room was crowded. Lords from the Stormlands, the Reach, the Crownlands, and beyond had gathered to witness. Robert Baratheon stood at the base of the Iron Throne, wearing his crown, his thick arms folded, a stony expression on his broad face. Eddard Stark was at his right, sober and grim. Melisandre stood at his left, her red robes a bright slash of color against the dark crowd, her ruby glinting. The hush was absolute. Cersei was brought forth, escorted by gold cloaks. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were made to stand separately, guarded but treated gently. The king addressed the hall, voice raw with contained fury. "Lords of Westeros, you stand here to bear witness. I have discovered grave treachery within my own household. My own wife, who has cuckolded me with her brother, producing children that are not mine. She has sought to place these children in line for my throne, though they have no drop of Baratheon blood. Proof abounds. The children's hair, the records of lineages that show House Baratheon yields black of hair for centuries. Witnesses to her liaisons with Ser Jaime. The final investigation of the late Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, and the confessions of the Red Priestess who read the truth in the flames." He paused, letting the gasps and whispers wash over the hall. Many looked at Cersei, at the children, with horror or disgust or pity. Some stared at Robert, uncertain. Tyrell men exchanged glances, while Redwine bannermen muttered among themselves. A few from the Westerlands scowled in disbelief or denial, but the stacked evidence was damning. "Do you deny it?" Robert demanded of Cersei, his voice echoing against the stone columns. She raised her head, green eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "I deny nothing. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are my children, and I love them more than I ever loved you. You are a brute and a drunkard. I will not stoop to beg for mercy." A wave of shock rippled. Robert's face was thunderous. "You admit your treason in front of the realm?" Her jaw tightened. "I did what I had to. You never wanted me. You only wanted your precious Lyanna, so I found love elsewhere." Her eyes flickered to Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. "I have no regrets." Robert spat. "Then let all see what your house has done. Let them witness the Lannisters' betrayal. If Tywin Lannister dares to raise arms in response, let him stand condemned for supporting incestuous traitors." A cry rose among some of the lords, calling for Cersei's head, for condemnation of the children. The knights of the Westerlands looked enraged, uncertain whether to defend her or distance themselves from the scandal. Joffrey tried to step forward, screaming at the gold cloaks to unhand his mother, but they held him back, their expressions uneasy. The boy's face was contorted with rage and confusion. Robert signaled for silence. "The fate of these traitors is mine to decide. I call upon the great lords to witness that any aggression from Casterly Rock will be met with the king's justice. This is my realm, and I will not be defied." The hearing ended in a storm of shouts and gasps. Outside the throne room, the gathered nobles debated among themselves in anxious clusters. War felt closer than ever, yet Robert had laid out the truth publicly, forcing the lords to acknowledge the Lannisters' wrongdoing. Some might stand aside, not wishing to defy Tywin's wealth and power, but few could claim ignorance now. Privately, Ned Stark approached Robert. "You have set the stage, but Tywin is not a man easily cowed. He will test your resolve. And the children, what do you intend to do with them?" Robert exhaled heavily. "I don't know, Ned. If I kill them, I become the monster. But if I let them live, Tywin has bargaining pieces to rally around. I may confine them somewhere secure, but there's still a risk." Melisandre stood by quietly, then said, "If you kill them, the realm will see you as cruel, and their blood could stain your reign, forging bitterness and a thirst for vengeance. Keep them alive, confined, so Tywin has little cause to paint you as a child killer. Use them as leverage to force peace. Let them live in a place where they cannot be used against you easily." Robert muttered, "The last thing I want is war, but it seems inevitable." Ned gently touched the king's shoulder. "We will stand by you. The North remembers its vows. If Tywin chooses war, the Starks will fight for the throne we helped you claim." Something like gratitude flickered across Robert's face. "I pray it doesn't come to that, Ned. But if it does, I'll need you." In the following weeks, the realm braced for Tywin's response. Ravens flew to and from the Westerlands, alliances were tested, and the city endured a tense calm. Melisandre prayed often in her chambers, communing with the flames, seeking glimpses of the future. She saw visions of armies clashing, the banners of the stag and the lion locked in mortal strife. But some nights, the visions gave her a faint hint that perhaps, just perhaps, another outcome was possible, if the right choices were made. Meanwhile, Robert summoned Renly and Stannis to join him. Stannis came reluctantly from Dragonstone, stern and humorless as ever, suspicious of Melisandre and her newly revealed shift in perspective. Renly, his ambition stirring, saw opportunity in the downfall of the Lannisters and whispered that maybe Robert should put aside Cersei completely and take a new queen from one of the powerful houses, forging a stronger alliance. Robert half listened, still reeling from betrayal and uncertain if he wanted to wed again so soon. During one council session, Stannis glowered at Melisandre. "You came to Dragonstone once," he said, voice taut. "You spoke of me as Azor Ahai, a champion of your fire god. Now you stand in King's Landing, giving counsel to Robert. Am I to believe the flames changed their minds?" Melisandre's eyes flickered with something akin to respect. "The flames reveal possibilities, my lord. They showed me your worth, your determination. They also showed me that the time was not yet ripe for you to stand forth. If you had moved against Robert in secrecy, civil war would have torn the realm apart, leaving it vulnerable. The darkness beyond the wall needs a united front. This way, your brother remains in power and the Lannister threat is addressed openly. You will still play a crucial role, but not as the realm's immediate claimant." Stannis clenched his jaw. "You speak in riddles." She inclined her head. "Lawloress truth is often hidden in riddles. But trust that I serve the light. You are not cast aside. The path ahead remains open." Stannis was not satisfied, but he grudgingly accepted for the moment. He saw how Robert had grown in resolve since the Red Priestess's arrival. Perhaps that was no bad thing. If Tywin Lannister was brought to heel, it would stabilize the realm, and Stannis could focus on other duties, such as the royal fleet and the threat of smuggling and piracy. Meanwhile, Cersei languished in luxurious captivity. Her chambers guarded, her children kept apart. She refused to eat for days in protest, prompting Robert to worry for Tommen and Myrcella, who were too young to fully grasp the situation. Joffrey scowled at his keepers, shouting how he was the rightful prince, threatening them with his grandfather's wrath. The Gold Cloaks looked uneasy, but Robert had placed men loyal to him in command. As the tension reached a fever pitch, a final raven arrived from Casterly Rock. Tywin demanded the immediate release of Cersei and her children, with all honors, or he would bring the combined might of the Westerlands and any allies he could muster against King's Landing. Robert read the letter in silence, his brow furrowed. "He offers no compromise," the king said at last, tossing the parchment aside. "He wants them released, unharmed, with not a word more about their false claim, as if that's possible now that the realm knows." Ned Stark said softly, "Perhaps he hopes intimidation will force you to yield. He must realize how damaging the scandal is. He's gambling that fear of war will make you relent." Renly snorted. "He's mad if he thinks we'll just let the traitors go free after exposing them in front of half the realm." Robert clenched his fists. "Mad or arrogant, it doesn't matter. War is at our doorstep." Melisandre, standing by, closed her eyes briefly. "This conflict might be resolved swiftly if you act decisively, or it could sprawl into a conflict that ravages the realm. You have the advantage now. Tywin is far from the capital, lacking the element of surprise. The lords know of his daughter's treachery. You have your brothers here, and a chance to rally your bannermen." Robert nodded slowly. "Then we march." Thus the city stirred to the horns of war. Banners of the crowned stag flew proudly. Men from the Stormlands, from the Crownlands, and even some from the Reach joined Robert's muster. Stannis prepared the royal fleet to block any attempt by the Lannisters to approach by sea. Ned Stark pledged forces from the north, although it would take time for them to arrive in full. the capital readied for siege if it came to that. The city watch patrolled with vigilance, stamping out any pockets of sabotage that might lurk within. Melisandre prepared her own brand of war. She had no legion of soldiers, but she had the powers of the Red God. Late at night, in the depths of the Red Keep, she performed a ceremony to call upon Lawlor's favor, forging a flame that flared with unnatural brightness. A few watchers swore they saw shapes coiling in that flame, as if living shadows danced within. She prayed not just for victory, but for a swift resolution to preserve the realm for the greater struggle ahead. In the early dawn, Robert marched from King's Landing, leading a host eager to confront Tywin before he could strike. The king wore black armor inlaid with gold, a massive warhammer strapped to his side, reminiscent of the weapon that had slain Rhaegar Targaryen. Though older and heavier now, Robert retained the aura of a battle-hardened warrior. By his side rode Ned Stark and Renly, each accompanied by their retinues. Stannis oversaw the fleet. Melisandre rode behind the vanguard, her red cloak billowing, silent in the morning light. The small folk watched anxiously from the city walls, uncertain if their king's triumph would spare them, or if they were witnessing the dawn of a cataclysmic war. Outside the capital, the host swelled as local lords joined. News traveled of Robert's plan to meet Tywin near the Blackwater Rush, hoping to either parley or crush the Westerland forces quickly. Days passed as the armies maneuvered, each seeking advantage. Scouts clashed in the narrow passes. Tension mounted like a drawn bowstring. Finally, near the rolling plains east of the Blackwater Rush, Robert's outriders spotted the Golden Lion banners of House Lannister. Tywin's army was large, bolstered by supplies from the Rock and the loyalty of many Westermen. They set up a formidable camp, defenses prepared. Robert halted his forces within sight, sending a herald to demand Tywin's presence for a final parley. In a great field ringed by both armies, King Robert met Tywin Lannister. The Lord of Casterly Rock wore resplendent armor polished to a shine, his face a cold mask beneath a golden helm. Guards from both sides formed uneasy lines, ready to spring into battle at the slightest provocation. Ned Stark stood behind Robert, hand on the pommel of his sword. Melisandre watched from a short distance, standing with a small retinue of red-robed followers who had come from across the narrow sea at her behest. Tywin's green eyes flicked to the Red Priestess briefly, then back to Robert. "You've cast shame upon my daughter, King Robert, and upon my grandchildren. You hold them captive in the capital. I demand their release." Robert's scowl was carved into his bearded jaw. "Your daughter shamed herself. She gave me bastards, fathered by her brother. The realm knows the truth. I will not yield them to you." Tywin's voice was cold as winter. "And so you think you can keep a lion's cubs in a cage? If I must," Robert growled. "You dare threaten open war after your house's betrayal? If you had any sense, you'd be on your knees begging pardon, offering to help rectify this monstrosity. Instead, you gather your knights. I won't be cowed, Tywin." Tywin narrowed his eyes. "My sense tells me that a house as old and rich as mine should not bow to an upstart's wrath. You are king by conquest, and perhaps you forget the debts owed to House Lannister. Debts the crown can ill afford to repay if you sever ties so violently." Robert's fury ignited. "You dare talk of debts while you throw the realm into chaos? I have the right, the duty, to punish your daughter's treason. She tried to seat a false heir on my throne. Even you must see how this ends." Ned Stark stepped forward, trying to calm Robert. "Lord Tywin, is there truly no path to spare the realm a bloody confrontation? The truth is plain, and the realm will not accept those children as heirs. You cannot unring that bell. Surely you can see further bloodshed only worsens your position." Tywin flicked a gaze at Ned. "You speak sense, Lord Stark. But I think you underestimate the severity of this insult. My daughter is imprisoned. My name is slandered. If Robert wants peace, let him release Cersei and the children to me and publicly acknowledge the crown's debt to House Lannister. Then we might avoid the battlefield." Robert barked a humorless laugh. "Acknowledge a debt? You want me to pay you for siring bastards in my own bed? You want me to say I was wrong? No, no, Tywin. That will never happen. Melisandre stepped forward now, her ruby glinting in the sunlight. Lord Tywin, hear me. You cling to illusions of pride, but pride can destroy a kingdom. War will come if you do not relent, and in that war, both sides will bleed. Your gold cannot buy the realm's forgiveness. If you continue this course, you risk plunging Westeros into darkness, just as a far greater threat looms. Tywin's lip curled faintly. I suppose you're the one whispering these visions into Robert's ear. Did you also advise him to show no mercy to my daughter and grandchildren? She met his gaze levelly. I advised him to reveal the truth. The realm must be united, not deceived by a false line of succession. Already the great lords are aware. You cannot hide this behind gold. A long silence. The wind stirred banners overhead, the crowned stag and the golden lion dancing in the breeze. The forces behind each leader shifted uneasily, sensing the tension in the air. Tywin's voice was quiet and deadly. You have chosen war, it seems, not I. My men are prepared to defend my family's honor. If you will not yield or negotiate their release, I see no reason to continue this charade. Robert's anger radiated. So be it. You stand a traitor. The next time we meet, it will be with steel. Pray to your gods, Tywin, for you'll find none here. With that, the parley ended in thunderous finality. Both sides withdrew to their camps, each lord planning for bloodshed. Scouts and outriders galloped across the fields, scouting terrain, seeking advantage. The day drew to a close in a haze of tension so thick that the very air felt heavy. Robert conferred with Ned, Renly, and his captains, drawing up a battle plan. Tywin, they surmised, would try to lure them into attacking across unfavorable ground or wait for reinforcements from the Westerlands. Melisandre remained still, feeling the ebb and flow of fate. She prayed once more to Lawler that the realm might be spared a long slaughter. But the flames had shown her glimpses of carnage. The unstoppable chain of events had been set in motion ever since she revealed the Lannisters' treachery to Robert. Perhaps, though, her presence had given him a chance to unify the realm more quickly, to confront Tywin before he could fortify too strongly. That night, the Red Priestess stood outside Robert's command tent, gazing at the sky. A crescent moon hung overhead, the stars like scattered diamonds. The smell of campfires and the murmurs of thousands of men drifted around her. She could sense Robert's restlessness within the tent, hear the low rumble of his voice as he drank. The next dawn might see the armies clash. Even she, who peered into the flames, did not know how many men would fall. In the darkness, a shape moved behind her, and she turned, seeing Ned Stark approach. His face was solemn. "Lady Melisandre," he said quietly, "the king has asked for you. He says he wants to know what your flames see about the coming battle." She inclined her head and followed Ned into the tent. Robert stood by a brazier, shoulders tense, his warhammer leaning against a table strewn with maps. Renly and several commanders hovered nearby, their expressions apprehensive. At Melisandre's approach, Robert gestured impatiently. "You see the future in your fires, priestess. Look into them now. Tell me if tomorrow I'll crush Tywin or if we're marching to our doom." Melisandre did not shy away. She placed her hands over the brazier, feeling the heat. She prayed softly, words in a foreign tongue, then stared intently into the coals. Slowly, she breathed, letting the swirl of images fill her mind. She saw stags and lions clashing, blood staining the grass. She saw the flash of steel, heard the cries of dying men. In the midst of it, she saw Robert himself with his warhammer raised high, smashing through lines of gold-helmed knights. She saw Tywin's stern face, unwavering. Another flash showed a lion's standard in flames, then a pair of broken antlers. The vision fragmented into swirling red. She gasped as a deeper darkness intruded, something pale and cold stirring beyond the edges of the mortal battlefield. Then it was gone. She blinked, reorienting, the taste of ash in her mouth. "Well?" Robert demanded. She gazed at him, measuring her words. There will be blood, your grace, but I see a strong chance of victory for you tomorrow, if you strike swiftly. Yet the cost might be high. Tywin is cunning, but if you break his lines, he may retreat. If you hesitate, or if your men lose heart, the lion's claws will tear deep. I saw victory's light, but also the price. Many will die. Robert breathed out heavily. War always demands a price. He turned to his commanders. At first light, we march to meet them. We'll anchor our right flank on that ridge. He stabbed a finger at the map. And let Stannis' cavalry from the fleet circle behind them if possible. We'll press them hard. If Tywin retreats, we chase him until he yields or breaks. Understood. The men nodded. Ned stroked his beard in thought. It's a bold plan, Robert. But if Tywin's scouts are good, he might prepare an ambush. We should be wary. Renly smirked. We're aware of Tywin's cunning. But Robert's hammered cunning foes before. The day belongs to the strong. With the plan set, the men departed to see to the final preparations. Robert lingered, swirling wine in a cup. He looked at Melisandre. If I do win tomorrow, the realm might yet know peace. We'll see if Tywin yields. Should he not, I'll chase him back to the rock and tear it down stone by stone. Melisandre dipped her head. May the Lord of Light guide you, your grace. But remember, even in victory, the realm's troubles will not end. The darkness stirs in the far north. He nodded, drained his cup, and dismissed her. She left him to his brooding, stepping outside to see Ned waiting. He gave her a curt nod, then asked quietly, "You truly believe Robert will win?" She paused, choosing her words. "I see the possibility is strong. The men are loyal, and the realm sees the Lannisters' betrayal. But it is a battle, Lord Stark. No vision is absolute." Ned gazed at the dying campfires. "It's more than we had before you arrived. For that, I suppose I'm grateful. Even if it leads us into war, at least the truth is no longer hidden." The next dawn broke red and foreboding. A low mist hugged the plain, and the shrill call of horns echoed across the distance. The armies formed ranks, banners snapping in the breeze. Robert donned his armor, mounted a great warhorse, and led the charge at sunrise. Tywin's lines met them with disciplined ferocity. The clang of steel, the thunder of hooves, and the cries of men filled the air. Melisandre, positioned with the reserve, held her staff high, the ruby glinting in the weak sun. She whispered prayers to Lawler for those about to kill and die, for the realm's chance at unity. Battle raged for hours. Robert Baratheon, fueled by fury and a desire to end this swiftly, smashed through lines of Westerland pikemen. He was spotted in the thick of the fight, hammer rising and falling, the crowned stag upon his helm glinting with gore. Ned Stark led a flank that pressed Tywin's cavalry back, forcing them into unfavorable ground by the marshy banks. Renly's contingent maneuvered to strike from the side. Tywin, outnumbered and facing the crown's combined forces, fought with relentless efficiency, but soon cracks appeared in his lines. When the sun was high, the Lannister ranks began to buckle. Tywin, seeing the tide of the battle turning, signaled a retreat. Many Westermen disengaged, fleeing west, pursued by Robert's outriders. Bodies littered the field. The stench of blood was thick. Tywin's horse was seen galloping away, red with foam. Robert roared a challenge, but the Lord of Casterly Rock did not look back. By early afternoon, the Crown's forces held the field. Robert's men cheered, though many lay wounded or dying. Ned Stark, battered but alive, found the king near a corpse-strewn rise. Robert breathed heavily, gore dripping from his hammer, his armor dented. Victory blazed in his eyes. "They're broken, Ned. We've won." Melisandre arrived, eyes solemn. "Your Grace, you've driven them to flight, but some remain at large, gathering. Will you pursue them to the rock?" Robert spat blood from a cut on his lip. "I will chase the old lion if he dares keep fighting. If he doesn't bend the knee, I'll break him for good." He surveyed the battlefield with a grim satisfaction. "Your visions were right, Red Woman. We've paid the price, but we have our victory." She nodded, though she glanced at the horizon. A swirl of dark clouds gathered far to the north, a reminder of the looming cold threat that overshadowed even their triumph here. Blood had been spilled to protect the king's rightful throne from Lannister treachery. But the realm's trials were far from over. As Robert's heralds proclaimed the victory, men chanted his name. Survivors picked through the field, finishing off wounded enemies, tending to their own. Tywin's retreat meant the war was not fully over. Yet this blow had shattered the illusion of Lannister invincibility. With the Queen's crimes exposed, with Tywin's defeat on open ground, the realm would witness the true strength of the Baratheon reign. That night, Melisandre watched the king's army make camp near the battlefield. The pyres were lit for the dead, flames rising into the black sky, dancing in a macabre reflection of her own red goddess. She offered prayers for the souls departing the mortal realm, for every stag and lion that had fallen. War was the darkest stage upon which men tested their convictions, and it was never without cost. Across the flames, she spied Ned Stark staring into the flickering light, sorrow etched into his features. He thought of the wives made widows, the children orphaned. Melisandre approached him, her voice quiet. "This was necessary," she said. "If the Lannisters had not been challenged, the realm would suffer worse. A short, decisive war can spare greater calamity." Ned did not look at her. "I pray you're right, my lady. I pray that tomorrow we don't find ourselves in another battlefield, repeating the same tragedy over and over." She acknowledged the burden in his voice. "The greatest war is yet to come, Lord Stark. We must secure the realm so that we can face the darkness beyond. Only unity will save us from the coming cold." Ned finally turned to her, candlelight dancing in his weary eyes. "Robert trusts you. You claim to serve the light. If that's true, help us end this quickly." Melisandre gazed at the blazing pyres. "I will. The dawn must come after the longest night, Lord Stark. I will do everything I can to ensure the realm sees that dawn." In the following days, Robert's army advanced westward, skirmishing with scattered Lannister forces. Messengers were sent to Tywin, demanding his surrender. A battered lion is still dangerous, but word spread that the crown was unstoppable with the north, the Stormlands, and even parts of the Reach uniting behind Robert. The might of House Baratheon overshadowed the Lannisters, especially with their scandal laid bare. More houses hesitated to side with Tywin, not wishing to be aligned with traitors who had tried to seat false heirs. Eventually, as Robert's host drew closer to the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister bent to necessity. He offered terms: recognition of Robert's rightful crown and rightful heirs, if he named any future ones, disinheritance of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, in exchange for their safe custody and Cersei's life. He promised to pay a significant fine to the crown and cede certain border territories. Robert, though furious and mistrustful, saw that acceptance might bring a quicker end to hostilities. War in the Westerlands could drag on for months, even years. The realm had bled enough. A final meeting was arranged near Ashmark with Tywin. The Lord of Casterly Rock approached with a smaller entourage this time, clearly battered by the defeat. Robert arrived in all his bullish vigor, flanked by Ned Stark and a handful of sworn swords. Melisandre watched from behind, a silent sentinel of the Red Faith. Tywin offered a formal apology for his daughter's crimes, stopping short of bending the knee physically, but in every other way acknowledging Robert's supremacy. Robert demanded that Jaime be removed from the Kingsguard permanently, exiled to Casterly Rock, never to hold office or rank again. Tywin bristled but accepted. Cersei would remain in custody in King's Landing for the foreseeable future, though treated well. The children were to be recognized as Lannister byeblows, with no claim to the throne. House Lannister was to pay gold to the crown coffers and yield certain rights in the Westerlands. With reluctance smoldering beneath every word, Tywin sealed the agreement. The realm breathed a sigh of relief. Open warfare had been nipped in the bud. Though resentments and injuries lingered, the crown had preserved stability, thanks in part to Melisandre's arrival and her revelation of the Lannister treachery. Robert's status as undisputed king now stood on firmer ground than ever. When Robert returned to King's Landing in triumph, the crowds cheered him. They might not understand every nuance, but they knew the Lannisters had been exposed, that the Baratheon king had won a swift victory. Celebrations broke out in the streets. The captured queen was paraded, though Robert forbade humiliating her further. He had won, but he did not glory in cruelty. Melisandre watched from a balcony as Robert led a victory procession up the city's main thoroughfare. Eddard Stark rode beside him, face stern, and the king's bannermen carried their banners high. Soldiers chanted the king's name. Cersei was nowhere to be seen. She remained in quiet captivity, along with her children, guarded carefully. The rumors of their parentage had circulated widely now. No one doubted the power of House Baratheon in the Red Keep, nor the Red Priestess who had helped bring these truths to light. That evening, Robert held a feast in the Great Hall. Lords, knights, and courtiers drank and sang. The tension that had gripped the capital for so long began to ease, though the aftermath of war still weighed upon them. At the high table, Robert drained his cups, but his boisterous laughter was tinged with a new resolve. He thanked Ned for his loyalty, praised Renly's cunning, and even nodded to Stannis, acknowledging his contribution. Melisandre, standing to one side in the torchlight, saw the shift in Robert's demeanor. He was a king hardened by betrayal, forced to see illusions stripped away. Perhaps it would make him a better ruler, more vigilant. Or perhaps his old vices would return to bury the pain. For now, at least, the realm had a semblance of unity, one that might just endure long enough to face the greater threat she had glimpsed in the flames. As the feast wound down, Robert turned to Melisandre, voice slurred with wine. "You came with warnings of shadows and cold. Well, I suppose I owe you some courtesy for helping me settle the lion's treachery. Speak, woman. What do we do next?" She inclined her head, her ruby shimmering. "You must secure the realm's unity, rebuild alliances, prepare for the coming winter. The night's watch must be strengthened. For the darkness I spoke of stirs in the far north." He rubbed his beard, eyes pensive. "The night's watch, we send them criminals and bastards. Who takes them seriously?" "More must take them seriously," she said, "or we will regret it. The day will come when you will need every sword, be it from the Night's Watch or the Southern Lords. That is the vision the flames grant me." Robert snorted, half amused. "You truly believe the old tales, don't you? The others, the White Walkers." Then his smile faded. "But you saw truths in the Lannisters that I didn't. Maybe you see truths in that too." Melisandre bowed slightly. "My visions are not always clear, but the threat is real. I ask you only to remember and to stand ready." The king nodded grudgingly. "I'll consider it. In the meantime, I have a realm to repair. By the gods, my realm has rotted with secret treachery for too long." Melisandre dipped her head. "Then, your grace, my purpose here is fulfilled for the moment. But I will remain if you'll have me. There may be more illusions yet to be revealed, more battles to prevent." Robert gave her a long look, then nodded. "Aye, stay. Keep watch with your red god. If more devils arise in my own house, maybe you'll sense them before I do." In the weeks that followed, King's Landing entered a precarious peace. The Lannister forces largely stood down, Tywin having bowed to necessity. Jaime Lannister was stripped of his white cloak and banished to the Westerlands. Cersei remained in heavily guarded chambers, her children kept separately. Many in the court wondered if Robert would eventually execute them. But the king, despite his fury, chose not to stain his hands with the blood of children. For now, they remained living proof of the Lannisters' treachery, ensuring Tywin's compliance. Stannis returned to Dragonstone, though in a less sullen mood, perhaps seeing that the threat of open civil war had been averted. He gave Melisandre a final look that suggested their paths were not done intersecting. Renly stayed at court, whispering about the future, perhaps entertaining the idea that Robert might name him heir now that Joffrey was disinherited. But Robert made no immediate declaration, focusing instead on the tasks of governance and the restoration of order. Eddard Stark prepared to depart for the north, having served his part in helping the king. Before leaving, he met Melisandre in a corridor overlooking Blackwater Bay. The gulls circled overhead, crying out into the salty breeze. Ned turned to the Red Priestess, studying her carefully. "Had you never come," he said, "the truth might have remained hidden, or if I had tried to reveal it, maybe Robert wouldn't have listened. We might have faced a different kind of war." She inclined her head. "The Lord of Light willed that the truth come to the king, and the moment was ripe. That was my purpose." Ned's gray eyes flickered with a hint of gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You averted a more disastrous conflict, I think. We lost men, but it could have been far worse." She gave him a faint smile. "Pray to the light that the realm remains united for the true challenge. If you see anything strange in the north, anything that suggests the old tales have teeth, send word. I will do what I can." Ned nodded gravely, recalling the rumors of wildlings stirring beyond the wall and the uneasy omens. "I will," he promised, before turning to take his leave. Melisandre watched him go, then gazed out over the bay. The water sparkled beneath the sun, belying the darkness she felt looming in the far reaches of the world. Yet for now, her mission here was accomplished. Robert Baratheon sat more securely on the Iron Throne, freed from the Lannisters' poisonous betrayal. The realm was, at least on the surface, more stable. She could continue her work, guiding those in power to prepare for the war that truly mattered, the war of ice and fire. As the days turned to weeks, her presence in the Red Keep became more accepted. Courtiers might whisper about the foreign woman in red who had the king's ear, but few dared challenge her openly. She spent hours in the library, studying old records about the Long Night, about Azor Ahai, about the Targaryen dragons that once roamed these halls. Sometimes she stood on the walls at night, scanning the sky as if searching for signs among the stars. Robert turned more of his attention northward, mustering resources for the Night's Watch at Melisandre's urging, albeit with some skepticism. He tried to bolster alliances with the Arryns, the Tyrells, the Martells, seeking a more unified realm than ever before. Joffrey, sullen and hateful, remained a prisoner, occasionally raging against his guards. Myrcella wept quietly for her mother, while Tommen's gentle nature endeared him to some of the keep's attendants, though no one forgot he was still a Lannister bastard in the eyes of the law. The tension that had once simmered around the capital eased, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps, many thought, the realm had been spared a terrible war, thanks to the shocking reveal of incest and treachery. Yet beyond the wall, the winds grew colder, carrying omens of a harsh winter. Across the sea in Essos, rumors spread of dragons stirring, though those remained but whispers. And in the Red Keep, Melisandre continued to peer into the flames at night, seeking glimpses of the shape of things to come. She saw fleeting visions of a Targaryen princess with silver hair, of a boy at the wall with wolf's blood, of rising darkness in the frozen north. But for now, the immediate danger, the Lannister infiltration of the throne, had been dealt with. She had reshaped the fate of Westeros by going to Robert Baratheon instead of Stannis. A single spark had ignited the revelation that upended House Lannister's ambitions. In the quiet of her chamber, she reflected on what she had done. Was this the path to victory over the true darkness? Had she, by aiding Robert, ensured that the realm would be ready when the dead marched? The flames told her only that the story was far from over, that new betrayals, new alliances, new heartbreaks awaited. But at least, for this moment, the realm had stepped one pace closer to unity under a king who, for all his flaws, was no longer bound by the lion's deceit. When Robert summoned her late one evening, she found him in the small council chamber, swirling a goblet of wine. He stared at the table where a new map of Westeros was spread. "I never dreamed I'd trust a foreign priestess," he said, words slurred by drink, but not entirely. "But you opened my eyes. For all your talk of your Lord of Light, maybe you saved us from a bigger war." Melisandre dipped her head. "War may yet come, your grace, but it will be on better terms for you. Tywin cannot move so boldly now. He has lost face, men, and a chance at the throne. Robert grunted. True, and I'm grateful. But sometimes, I can't help thinking about how different things might have been if I'd known from the start that Cersei was traitorous. If Jon Arryn had lived long enough to tell me plainly, maybe I wouldn't have fathered so many bastards around the city, or wasted so many years in the cup. I might have done better. She studied him, seeing regret behind his eyes. The flames show us possibilities, not certainties. You are here now, and you have another chance to be the king the realm needs. He sighed heavily, downing the last of his wine. Aye, that's what Ned keeps telling me. Still, I can't shake the ghosts of the past. Lina, I lost her, started a war, took a throne, ended up with a queen who hated me. Now I see she hated me so much she bedded her own brother. Melisandre waited for him to continue. Finally, he drew himself up. The realm is what matters now, not my regrets. I'll do what I must. If the Lannisters rise again, I'll crush them. If the darkness you speak of comes from the north, I'll face it. And I'll keep you around, Red Woman, to read your fires and warn me of new threats. She inclined her head. I will stand with you, your grace, until the dawn drives away the darkness. And so she remained in the Red Keep. Under her quiet vigilance, the court took cautious steps forward, forging new ties, reinforcing the realm's defenses, mindful of the cunning that had nearly stolen the throne from beneath Robert's nose. Though the threat of House Lannister was tamed for the time being, the Seven Kingdoms still harbored countless rivalries and ambitions. Peter Baelish and Varys wove their webs of secrets. Renly eyed the future with envy. Stannis nurtured his stern pride on Dragonstone. In the north, Ned Stark returned to Winterfell, vigilant for any sign of the unnatural. Yet a single spark of truth had changed the course of history. Melisandre, by choosing to seek out Robert Baratheon instead of Stannis, had set into motion an upheaval that exposed the Lannisters' grand deceit before it took root. She had risked everything on a vision that the rightful king needed to be warned. She had spared the realm a lengthy civil war that might have erupted had Robert died in ignorance or if Stannis had moved alone. Instead, the realm was battered but not broken, its king fiercely reasserting his claim. As the months turned, signs of winter crept south. Colder winds, early snow in the mountains. The seeds of strife still lingered, for the hearts of men were fallible. But Melisandre hoped that with House Baratheon more firmly entrenched, with Robert awakened to the necessity of unity, Westeros might stand a chance against the far greater foe she sensed in the flames. She continued her nightly vigils, peering at flickers of prophecy dancing in the red glow, seeing glimpses of White Walkers and an army of the dead, the forging of alliances, the unraveling of illusions. These were but the first steps in a longer dance of fire and ice. Sometimes, in her quiet moments, she wondered how events would have differed if she had gone directly to Stannis, as she once believed the flames commanded. Perhaps she would have lit the fires of ambition in him, leading him to claim the throne and plunge the realm into the War of the Five Kings. The land would have been drenched in blood, families sundered, the Seven Kingdoms so weakened that winter's march of death might have trampled them unopposed. By sparing Robert, by ensuring that the false heirs were revealed early, by forcing Tywin to yield, she had, with one act of intervention, ensured a stronger bulwark for the living. Or so she prayed. Thus, the tale of what if Melisandre had gone to Robert Baratheon instead of Stannis began its long weave through the tapestry of Westeros. The shock of Lannister treachery came sooner. Robert, though wounded by betrayal, rose to meet it. The realm felt the pangs of conflict, but it was a short, sharp war rather than an all-consuming blaze. And in the Red Keep, the Red Priestess kept watch, a living reminder that not all illusions remain hidden in the shadows forever. So long as the flames burned, truth could still blaze forth, guiding those with the courage to face it. And the final battle against the coming darkness lay over the horizon, waiting for the day when the realm would need that flame most.